But we have a few very interesting segments this evening, things that are kind of tie together pretty well.
Accidentally, yeah.
Yeah, not on purpose, ironically. And so we'll get right into it. Our Spectrum Pulse, and the name of this episode is Crusader, Orison, Capital Ships, Oh My. Um, and uh, if you've been active in the Info Runners and Astropub Discord, you have probably seen this
Or,
conversation
or
come up.
Spectrum,
Yeah,
or if you
Spectrum
play
as
Star
well.
Citizen,
Hmm.
or if you care about, astrophysics. No, sorry.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing thing that has gotten. Um, it was a big point of contention a while back before we even got Crusader. Talking about like how is this even going to work? How is Crusader? Is it really realistic? Is this even a thing? And it has resurfaced since now that we have Crusader and we have Orison in game. And now CIG has teased us or shown us the docking platforms as part of its August Dunlo spaceport down at Orison, or the docking platforms for capital ships. Where it has that docking arm thing that comes and sticks out, just like when you would dock your Hammerhead or your 890 jump to a station. And they're showing us the exterior, the interior of what that's going to look like. And so that brought up a lot of discussion of, okay, well, wait a minute, how the heck are how do capital ships get up and down to Orison? It's if for all of us that have played, every one of us should be painfully aware of the travel time to get down to Orison from space, from PO, and then even worse, back up. And so there's a lot of questions, and there's been a lot of interesting discussion that have followed it. I have my own opinions, but we're going to present this objectively, so that way you can see the information that we have. Um, I've got some good citations and everything, as well as some information that I pulled from the internet regarding it. And so that way you can come to your own sort of decision or opinion about what you think about this direction. Um, and actually, Nazareth, are you able to pull up that our screenshot shower thing that you've had before? Because I have the monthly report linked in
Yep,
the show notes.
yep.
If you wanted to pull up that shot and show it on screen, that would actually be a pretty good backdrop to use to talk about.
All right, there we go. And hopefully all this works. Go. There we go.
Wait for it. Always got to wait for the delay
Yeah,
broadcasting to Twitch.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm showing you in Discord. You have the
Aha!
yeah.
Perfect. That looks great. Thank you. So yeah, that first things first. I thought that shot was really dang cool looking, and just looking at the construction of the platform itself. Um, Boy, does that give me some Bespin vibes more than the
Oh
other
yeah,
ones
yeah.
for
Like who's
uh
what was the guy's name that does the in-game shots for CIG? I forgot his name.
oh, the camera guy. They
Yeah,
did the
yeah, I
it
forgot his
was
name.
the what do they call those segments on ISC where they focus on,
B-roll sizzle shots. Oh, you mean the like meet the dev kind of things?
yeah, where they've been talking to different people. I thought that one was really cool, but I
Yeah,
think it's a really cool shot,
he
and
knows
it
his
shows
lighting.
how it's. Yeah, he definitely does. What a cool job just flying around the verse, getting screenshots for things like this. But it shows, you can see the connection points, how it would go off to the other different platforms because they're all connected and stuff. But it's a really, really great looking aesthetic. You can't really see, I don't think I can readily see, at least not with my eyes, where the actual docking port comes out, but
Nope.
it's around there somewhere. So just to start it off, all this, begs the question, the timing of it. Is this part of Invictus launch week? Are we going to see massive capital ships docking at Orison during Invictus launch week? Because or last year we had the Javelin docking at the space stations, the low orbit stations, and we were able to get the tour and everything. Um, so is this going to be a thing at Orison? Are we going to see javelins flying around an atmosphere? And is this a realistic expectation? The timing is kind of convenient. Um, and so some backstory on the lore is Crusader. Some most of you may know, some of you may not. Is a what's called a low mass gas giant. That's how it's described in the lore. And then if you Google that, you'll find sometimes they're called mini Neptunes, other times they're called gas dwarfs, because these low mass gas giants, they are still technically gas giants, but they're not anywhere remotely as large diameter or radius as a actual gas giant that we're familiar with, like in our solar system, um, Saturn, Jupiter, that sort of thing. Those planets being dramatically larger than Earth, in diameter, but they are still larger. But these, because they are smaller, and oftentimes they do still have a solid core with a very thick um, gas envelope, is what it was called when I was reading it. Um, they have uh, a much smaller diameter, much lower in mass, much closer actually, oftentimes to Earth. Only several times more massive than Earth, and several times larger in diameter. Um, and for comparison, in-game planets are all 1/10 scale. And so if in game, Crusader itself is actually 15,000 kilometers in diameter, whereas in real life, Earth is almost 13,000 kilometers in diameter. So in game, Crusader is actually larger than Earth in real life. Um, actual measurable distance. But when you think about it, if you multiply that by 10, that means that in diameter, Crusader, if it was a real life planet, which there are ones similar, low mass gas giants out there, it would be probably about 12 to 15 times the diameter of Earth. And so you would have to imagine that it would have a pretty thick gas envelope around it, gaseous atmosphere. Um,
Could you
far, you know,
could you imagine trying to go down to the Crusader 10 times the size of the atmosphere?
oh yeah, yeah, it's already, it already takes us quite a few minutes in little shuttlecraft, but
Hmm.
in the bigger ships,
There are
I
some
haven't
ships
tried to.
it does take a half an hour to exit atmosphere.
Yeah, I've ridden along on an 890 when we did it, and it felt like it took forever. um and so you can only imagine how other ships, the 890, um, which I think probably deserves a little bit of a rework to get some actual VTOL engines, but we'll get into that, because the 890 is supposed to go into atmosphere and go into gravity. And yeah, Origin has good thrusters, but is that really a great explanation? I don't know. But yeah, so Crusader itself is actually quite large, but it's not Jupiter or Saturn large, not by any means. Um, and so the other part of that lore is that Crusader has a breathable atmosphere at high altitude. So most gas giants have a lot of helium and hydrogen, and the colors that we see in them are when they mix with other exotic gases and water vapor, and so that's what gives them a lot of their color. Um, but at high altitudes, ostensibly that means that there is a oxygen concentration within, that settles above those gases. So it would seem that Crusader itself is a more exotic gas mixture, where maybe they are heavier gases at the below the breathable atmosphere, which allows for oxygen, and whatever other gases are in the atmosphere to be more settled up on the top, and that breathable band in the higher um, elevations, I guess you'd say. But what a lot of people don't take into consideration, and this is just because it's not a thing that most people think about, is that you have to have a certain amount of gravity in order to maintain a certain amount of atmospheric density for the atmosphere to be breathable. So you could have, 21% concentration of oxygen. But if your atmospheric density isn't enough, you won't be getting enough actual oxygen molecules to keep you alive, but B, you won't have enough atmospheric pressure in your lungs to keep your own bodily fluids from filling your lungs up. And so, like, if you are on a commercial flight way up high, 30 something thousand feet, if you lose cabin pressure, usually you don't lose it catastrophically or fast, but if you lose cabin pressure, um, the point of them giving you the oxygen mask is so that you get enough oxygen to stay alive long enough for the plane to descend low enough that the lack of atmospheric pressure won't cause what's called the high altitude pulmonary edema, where fluid just fills up your lungs and you drown. um, it is a race against time for that aircraft to get back down to a breathable level for humans, because we cannot survive in atmospheres that high, even with supplemental oxygen, just because there isn't enough atmospheric density. And so that leads us into these next points. Um, the Orison itself is maintained in that breathable, yeah, with a B, band, um, where uh, the atmosphere is thick enough, for humans to be able to breathe it, but also um, where the gravity is lower, so that way it's sort of just, it's not hovering, but it stays within this band. It actually goes up and down within this band, and it says a precise position, but in reality it would be, the platforms would sink and then they get pushed back up. They have, if you've ever looked at them or flown around them, the platforms themselves have these giant thrusters on them. They're called serif, SERAPH thrusters, and they're essentially giant, main thruster VTOL engines, um, that keep are all synchronized in order to keep Orison from shearing itself off, as it settles down into the atmosphere or when it rises back up. And the in-game lore is actually calls it the Orison massage, because of the rumbling of these thrusters as they're pushing the whole series of platforms back up into position to maintain themselves within that band.
There was another sci-fi that did something very similar to that, where it was like the coming on of the thrusters was more of an event that happened. I don't remember which one it was, but it was maybe it was a Doctor Who episode.
If you remember that, I'd be totally interested, because with the narrative team is really good about, um, they take a lot of influence from other sci-fi,
Hmm.
obviously, um, but that would be a really cool thing that they incorporated that's lesser known. Um, because it and they've told us that we're going to get maintenance missions, both for the stations, but we'll get maintenance missions for Orison, so we'll probably have to go down there and check on these thrusters, and
When
you know
the amount
don't
getting
fail the mission.
well, I imagine that would be something you would need a certain amount of rep for.
Hmm.
Like if
Yeah,
you could
you
like
have to
go and
be a
fix a
good
vending
enough
machine.
engineer.
Yeah, you could
Hmm.
like go and fix a vending machine to like rep up, and then once you're a trusted technician kind of skill level, you could then go and work on the thrusters.
How many pizza toaster ovens do you have to fix at the Lagrange point stations to get promoted to be able to work on the serif
Well, I
thrusters?
would. Well, that's R&R. You have to work on Orison. You have to work on like
Hmm.
Orison rep. So you're gonna have to be doing
Yeah.
toaster missions around Orison, which means you're gonna have a shuttle, and you're gonna have to go to all these different little landing sites to go and fix toasters.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be a super fun chore.
But that to me, that's what it was particularly interesting about it, because on in real life, one of my jobs is I'm a flight medic with the Army National Guard. I was a civilian flight paramedic for years, and so one of the big things we get taught is flight physiology, and so we learn a lot about atmospheric density, and how the changes in altitude affect you and your patients, and your equipment. And so it is important, because you do need a certain amount of atmospheric density in order to be able to function. Um, but that's why these serif thrusters are there, in order to keep the entire or certain platforms, within that band. They don't want them going up too high because then the air would get too thin and everybody would pass out. But that you can't sink too low because then you're getting into those gas, mixtures that are below the platforms. You can see them in game. You're sitting right above that sort of you know uh, area where they mix, and we don't know what those gases are. They could be highly toxic. If Orison settled too low, you could be in for a world of hurt. Um, but moving on a little bit further into the lore, the reason that Orison and the UE platforms that came before it are built where they are is because of that breathable atmosphere. It's not just because of the low gravity. The low gravity helps for getting making it more feasible to get large ships down to those repair docks to be repaired and out back into atmosphere after they've been repaired or after they've been manufactured. But it's that breathable, why can't I say that, breathable atmosphere, that is what significantly reduces the costs of working on these ships. And I put a link in the show notes. It was a Spectrum dispatch about Stanton from quite a while back. And it says being constructed in open air allows the cost of these ships to be reduced by almost 40% on the back end, which is often passed along to consumers. Often, space capitalism. Yeah. Um, but it makes it really interesting because they um, that the workers are able to work without being in full on breathing apparatus. They're not floating around in zero G, so they can probably work more efficiently. But it is the direct quote from the lore that it is the being able to work in open air is what allows the ship construction cost savings to occur. Ship construction, but also ship repair and everything. Um, so that led to a lot of questions, regarding, okay, is this just hand wavium, or is it even possible? Is this even realistic? And if you frequent the Info Runners Discord, you've probably chatted with Gizmo Gomez 47 and Tecton. They're both very active in that channel. And Gizmo Gomez actually has a background in astrophysics, like that's what he went to school for. And so he and Tecton, being a geologist, is apparently really good with numbers. And so the two of them, after a lot of heated discussion within the server, decided to, okay, let's science the shit out of this. Let's do the math and figure it out. And so they tried to talk, those of us who were participating in the conversation and following along. They tried to talk us through it, but they ended up making a spreadsheet. There's no way I could explain the spreadsheet, but I have it saved. If you have questions on it, I'm going to upload it and save it in the show notes. But if you have questions on what the things mean, by all means join the Info Runners Discord, and Gizmo would be happy to break it down for you. He's a really good guy, gal. I don't know.
Person.
Yeah, person. Um, but basically, what it came out to is that the math does make sense with a pretty wide
Nice.
range of low mass. So the way I understood the conversation is that they looked at known low mass gas giants, gas dwarfs, and what their mass was, based off what we what NASA knows. And they had a pretty decent range, based on the size of these planets, and they took those ranges and they basically worked through them, um, and able to say, okay, if it has this much mass, and we know about how big the diameters are from this range to that range, they're able to find out that um, for a pretty wide range of masses, that you had a pretty decent range where the atmosphere would be breathable for humans, at a gravity around 30 to 40%. Um, so low gravity, making it feasible for, or much more feasible for these platforms to be, you know, uh, floating, in Orison's atmosphere, but also have a atmospheric density that is breathable by humans. And depending on the mass and the gravity and everything is what fluctuated the um, density of the atmosphere. But it's pretty legitimate. And it legitimizes what we already know, that coming from Sherry Heiberg, the archivist, she has a background in astronomy. So it is conceivable that she knew this going into it, and maybe it was hand waving before, but she altered it or something. But it's pretty legitimate now. There are other things that people have mentioned with like wind shear. um, I don't know anything about that, and I won't delve into it. Ostensibly,
Uh,
if Orison is, you know orbiting or rotating around the core of the planet with the rest of the atmosphere, I don't know how it would have wind shear, but that's another argument for another day. But it was pretty
there's a lot
fascinating.
of fluid physics for that one.
Yeah, yeah, way above my pay grade. I do statistics. I don't do all this physics stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because
um,
it would depend on the heat getting to the planet, the rotation of the core, the rotation of the city, and the rotation of the clouds.
Interaction of the
Yep.
gases.
Yeah, it
You
would it
know,
would take a legitimate like college level physics simulation, or not even college, like the college simulations that like you continue, like Harvard continue work simulations. The people who are developing new meteorology equipment, that kind of simulation.
yeah. And so there's there's definitely some hand wavium, padding in there, in order to make it real. But the fact that, okay, that this is a real thing, and maybe the atmosphere is a little bit thin, but it's the 30th century. I'm sure we have supplements. You come up with your med gun and give you a shot when you get off your ship. Okay, now you're essentially blood doping, like if you were going up to a town, going vacationing in the Swiss Alps or something.
Yep.
So this explains how Orison sits in the breathable band, and how it would have about 30-40% gravity of Earth, allowing for those thrusters to keep Orison, floating. Um, but how do we do know that the atmosphere is still really thick. It's still a long trip down, and 30% of gravity is still gravity. That's still gravity. So how do capital ships get down to Orison, to be repaired, like we know they are in the lore, or even constructed, back in the days of the UEE, and with Crusader now building their large ships. Um, we do know that they build the um, Hercules there, but ostensibly we can assume that their other larger ships, like the Jupiter, are also built there.
Yeah.
We just probably won't ever see it.
Yeah.
Um,
Technically, like the Jupiter is built there, but we
yeah.
just may never see a physical Jupiter.
hmm Um, and so, but we also know that certain ships, like the Javelin, which is what kind of led us down this discussion, is, hey, could the Javelin actually go down to Orison and dock as part of Invictus Launch Week? Um, could the Javelin actually do it? Because 30% of the Javelin's mass is still a lot of mass. 30-40%. And the Javelin does not have any VTOL thrusters. And so I've linked it. I've put a picture in the show notes, from a transmission, back in the 310 patch cycle. It talked about flight improvements regarding atmospheric flight, with the initial implementation of some thruster efficiency curves, as well as the aerodynamic stuff. Um, but so we know that CIG plans to make these thruster efficiency curves, I hate to say it, more punishing, but to give it a little bit more sense of realism. Not actually realistic, but sense of realism.
I think
Um,
character is
and
a good
s-
one.
yeah, give it a bit more character. They're going for a lot more differential, or a big differential between space flight and atmospheric flight between different ships. Um, and so, yeah, I'm just going to read off from this quote that I screenshotted, and you'll see it in the show notes. We're also going to further refine the difference between maneuvering thrusters and main engines. The concept is that maneuvering thrusters are built for quick pulses of high thrust, for directional changes, while the main and VTOL engines are built for sustained thrust. This means that if you use maneuvering thrusters for sustained thrust, such as hovering for a prolonged time in gravity, they will have a lower thrust output and could overheat or misfire if used too long. This will further differentiate between ships in terms of space and atmosphere. Aerodynamic ships like the Gladius will be better suited to flying in atmosphere, as the lift generated by their wings negate the need for maneuvering thrusters to keep them aloft. But if a pilot wanted to treat a Gladius like a helicopter gunship, they could only do this for a limited time before straining the thrusters, whereas a Valkyrie with four large VTOL engines would have no problem. So this makes a lot of sense for ships like the Idris, who, I think the majority of the Idrises or main thrusters rotate and are VTOL capable. We've seen the Idris land planet side. I think it was on a moon though, but the Idris has landing gear. The bay, the hangar doors open up, make a ramp. Um, it is designed to do that, and so we can assume that the Idris, as a capital ship, would be able to go down to Orison, relatively easily because it's meant to do it on planets with relative gravity. But the Javelin is, and this is just what we have in game right now. There's probably going to be a lot more movement as far as mass, but the specs that we have on the Javelin, the mass is 3 times that of an Idris, but a javelin has no VTOL thrusters. So even if you're at 30% of gravity, a javelin in Orison's atmosphere at the or Crusader's atmosphere at the level of Orison is going to weigh as much as an Idris, but won't have anywhere near the thrust capacity for vertical thrust to maintain a hover as an Idris. And with how long it would take for you to fly from space down to Orison, um, could those maneuvering thrusters of the Javelin keep it afloat at a very low rate of speed so that it could dock? It just doesn't come up as very, very realistic to me, and a realistic proposition. But we know that capital ships get repaired at Crusader or at Orison. We know that they were manufactured there. That Crusader manufactures large and capital ships there. Um, and so you have to figure out, okay, how does CIG explain this in the lore, and then if they want it to happen, make it happen in game. And does Orison have a need for capital ships to dock? Well, obviously, if they're putting in docking there, there's a need for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't even put it in there. Whether it's delivering cargo, or maybe you're in your 890 jump mission. I mean, you could think that VIPs would definitely want to be transported to Orison, considering how scenic it is. It's a
Hmm.
big tourist trap. So our oligarchs, traveling across Stanton, and the UEE in their 890 jumps are definitely going to want to dock, at Orison, as well as, um, with Quanta, or Quantum being introduced and repair being dynamic. Uh, if you're able to get your repairs done in atmosphere at 40% or 40% cost reduction for your large or capital ship over what it would cost if you were having those repairs done at a station in space. It might be worth it for you to make that trip on down there. You may cost you some fuel, but as long as you can make the trip safely, you're not missing half your engines or thrusters or whatever. It could very well save you a big chunk of money, because we can assume that those repairs for those big ships are going to cost you some money. Um, the other solution to, if your ship is damaged, we have the Argo SRV. It is a space tugboat, space tow truck. This is its job, and it's even talked about in the Argo SRV uh, lore. From when it was concepted. That it can be used to pull ships. From up off the planet, get them back into space. And so ostensibly, we could definitely see them using that to explain it as well as utilize it with. What CIG is doing for NPC flight. I could totally see them being able to get NPCs to fly an SRV and basically pull up alongside you. Well, you request permission, at high altitude above Orison, and then all of a sudden a couple of NPC, SRVs just pop into existence nearby. They or they come up, and then they just pull up next to you, tractor beams, and then they just sort of hand wave you, gently lowers you down there, and it might take a little bit, but that cost savings might totally be worth it for you, when your repair bill is sky high. Um, so that was my thought on that. The other thing I was thinking about was, okay, once you're docked, how does your ship stay afloat? Is that telescoping arm thing really that strong that there's no sorts of torque going on? um, and maybe your ship just has to maintain its thrusters on, and they just plug you in to Orison, or maybe they could just have little autonomous VTOL thruster drones that latch onto your ship, and or Seraph, things that are floating. Who knows? Um, but I think that it's a based off the information that we have and that we know, what we got from Gizmo and Tecton, the lore. I think it's a very reasonable proposition that we could have capital ships docking at Orison, um, with assistance, and whether they make that assistance happen in, and this is capital ships not meant for going in atmosphere. We saw the Odyssey has VTOLs, and it's a capital ship. It's the newest capital ship, and it's definitely meant for landing on planets with gravity. And it has MISC VTOLs, and MISC we know has Xeon influenced thruster tech. Um, your the Carrack, isn't a capital ship, but it has VTOLs. The Idris has VTOLs. I'm sure we're going to see other ships, large ships that are going to have VTOL thrusters for doing this. But things that are larger than that, those are the things we have to consider. Is it realistic for the Javelin? Is it realistic for a whole E or D? You know, an Endeavor. Who knows what else to do it? Maybe not unaided, but I think it's very plausible for CIG to make it happen, either hand wavium or um, yeah, Othman Carrick is not a capital, but it does have VTOLs, and so I think it's a good breaking point for, hey, Carrick and larger. A lot of them are going to have VTOLs when if they're not released already, they will have them when they release, or they might get reworked to have them to make them more capable when these thruster efficiency curves become more of a thing. Because with the 890 being as big as it is, um, things could get real ugly real quick for 890 owners, if they only have maneuvering thrusters. And that could be a pretty quick fix for CIG to put some fancy Origin VTOLs on there to make it a more capable ship in atmosphere. I hope you guys can't hear my kids screaming in the background.
I haven't noticed if it
Apparently, he
was.
just woke up.
Oh,
Yeah, luckily the microphone is pretty only sensitive to me, but sometimes it'll pick things up in the background. But that was my thoughts.
all
Is
right.
using the Argo SRV, maybe autonomous VTOL things that attach to your ship, because they are planning on having repair drones. Why not just have a VTOL drone?
Like
Six of
homeworld.
them attached to your ship. Exactly. Yep. And they just go bloop. And
Yeah.
it's just an animation, and it makes it look cool. And that way you can turn off your ship and makes it believable. CIG uh, has put in more effort into less important things, I think.
Yeah. So I do
Um,
have one
but
image to tack on the end of your little discussion here, and
ooh,
that
an image,
is
cool.
an image. Yeah. So I looked up the original concept for the javelin,
Hmm.
and if you look into the stream, it has VTOLs.
It has thrusters, and that's the
No, it
thing is we
has
have this.
VTOLs specifically.
Oh, the old, yeah, the
Yeah,
old
the
one.
original concept of
Yeah,
the javelin had VTOLs.
God, the OG Javelin. Oh boy, that is
So the lore may
2013.
be running off of this concept.
It could be, except we had the Javelin specs in game, and we have the C. We've seen the Javelin. We know
Yeah.
it doesn't look like that anymore. But
Yeah. I couldn't
yeah,
see if it was
Javelin has VTOL confirmed.
no,
And
no, no.
if
Original confirmed.
yeah,
It's been reworked since. Like the
yeah.
freelancer lost its VTOLs as well. So
I kind of wish the freelancer would kind of get that back. I thought it was cool looking, but that would probably be a lot of work for him. Um, but um, I mean, I don't think CIG is going to rework the Javelin to make it, um, have VTOLs and landing gear this late in the game. But I think that they could definitely, and I think it's a realistic thing given where Stanton is and given the history and stuff that this should be a thing for javelins, and whatever else comes. We know there's going to be more ships. We know there's going to be more capital ships, um, whether it's the player ownable ones that we all hope and dream about,
Just add a rotor, it's
or
fine.
yeah.
So I have on screen now the new model of the Javelin,
Oh, good
and
job. Thank
and
you.
there's a strut there instead of a giant rotor.
Hmm.
So at least according to the shape language, no, they are not. They're not VTOLs currently,
Yeah.
and there's
Um,
only the one set in the front. The back ones don't look like they. The back ones
tho-
definitely do not rotate.
yeah, those are main thrusters, and we know the how many of the maneuvering and retro thrusters it has just because we have the specs that were data mined.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm pretty sure those little wings aren't going to generate enough lift. Just saying. But I mean, I'd have to smoke a whole lot of hopium in order to think that that would be enough,
Uh,
to get it to fly in atmosphere. But the Javelin is a destroyer. We're probably going to have more frigates and more corvettes. We know that the stretch goals included a cruiser and a battle cruiser. You know, does the where do the or where does the Bengal and the Pegasus go to get their repairs? Who knows? Maybe Orison isn't feasible for them. Maybe maybe it is.
Synth World.
I don't know. But I think the idea of using SRVs, is you know as far as an in-game mechanic would look super cool, and it's something that they have planned for players to do anyway. Um, and being a ardent Argo fan, I want to see it happen because more Argo, more better. The little Argos that could. Um, but yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. But it was an interesting thought exercise, both from partaking into it. Um, Partaking in the discussion, but also listening and following along, not listening, but following along with Gizmo and Tecton and some of the other guys, you know, um, guys and gals, going through this thought exercise. It was pretty enlightening, and there's a lot of really good ideas going back and forth. The links that I have came from other people. I was taking notes. And so I really appreciated the back and forth, and I know it got a little bit heated sometimes, and hopefully I didn't rub anyone the wrong way. But to me, these thought exercises are the best part of the the waiting game, while we're waiting for 317 to go live. Um, but yeah, that's about all I have for the Spectrum Pulse. Um, and as was thanks for pulling up those shots and everything. That definitely helps to illustrate it. And we can put those pictures in the show notes as well, just to illustrate these things.
And the
Um,
one last little note I have on here,
mhm.
how many tabs ago was that? Was the image was the name of the image was Orison Platform Variety.
Orison platform variety. Is that the one in the monthly report, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's the name of
Okay.
the image.
The sun
So
has gone down, so I
so
need to readjust my
so either
light, I think.
it's a variety of the platform, or just like we have the what are the names of the platforms we have? Um, this is how many times I go to Orson. What are the names of the platforms that we currently have in the game?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of them. Um, I am on. Are you talking about the platforms at Orison?
Yeah, yeah, they have
Uh,
names to them. Um,
yes. Hold on, let me scroll up. So there's a lot, but it's actually they have good screenshots on the SC Tools wiki.
mhm.
There's the Magna class Halo, the Paulus class Halo, um, Pearl class platform, Envoy class platform, Prestige class platform, Prestige worldwide, worldwide, worldwide.
Okay, so the platforms we have access to are Providence, Dunlow. August Dunlop
Oh,
spaceport
you're talking
and
about the ones that we can
Cloudview. Yeah,
land
yeah,
on.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, those
Okay.
two, those are good too. So it could
August
be that this
Dunlo.
is the Variety named platform. So this is named the Variety platform. It could be.
Mhm.
Just saying.
Yeah, who knows?
I don't want I'm just saying the name of this image was the platform Orson platform Variety. Was that capitalized? That's a great question. I have too many tabs. No, it's in all lower caps, not even Orison's capitalized, so no hints there. All right, that's it. That's it. I'm done. Enough
I'm just
side
watching the
noting.
stream on one screen, and it looks like my light's really bright on the stream, but it doesn't look like it on the ninja thing.
It looks fine from here. Like I
Okay.
said, my camera it's
Oh, I think it just now caught up. I've been
okay.
adjusting the lighting.
Okay.
Now that the sun's down, I do have a window over there. But yeah, that's all we have for the Spectrum Pulse. And um, as always, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions or links, anything that I missed, I know there's a lot of lore on Orison, and so I just sort of summarized it. Please let us know in the comments on YouTube. Send us a message on Discord. We're always very active in Inforunners and Astropub, and you can PM us if you want. But yeah, it was pretty fascinating to me. And